Good afternoon and welcome to another edition of Dodgers Dawgs as part of the Dodgers Daily Network. My name is Austin Brubaker. I'm going to be your host this afternoon, and it is a privilege to be able to do this continually here, Dodgers Daily. We've got a lot of fun, exciting stuff coming up for you guys. Obviously, Casey's working busy, doing a lot of player interviews. Just released his interview with Peyton Martin today. Also, last week, released interviews with guys like a Patrick Copen and a Carson Hobbs. There's a lot of fun, exciting stuff here at Dodgers Daily, but I'm really excited to be able to interact with you guys. Obviously, last week was the winter meetings across Major League Baseball, and the Dodgers made their big splash so far of the offseason in signing relief pitcher Edwin Diaz, the closer from the New York Mets, to be a Los Angeles Dodgers for 3 years. We'll be perhaps touching a little bit of that. We'll also be talking about a move that the Dodgers made as well, because their 40-man roster, with the addition of Edwin Diaz, was at 39. They actually added an additional player, so currently their 40-man roster is full. We'll be just briefly addressing who that player was that the Dodgers acquired. But more importantly today, what I want to focus on is a little bit more of an evaluation of the outfielders, particularly some of the outfielders that are either at the top of the market or some of the players that have been relatively rumored to be potential options for the Dodgers, because I think we've gotten to a point of the offseason where the bullpen is in a pretty good state. With the addition of Edwin Diaz, I think that makes this bullpen have at least enough depth and star power to where you're feeling a lot more confidence about it, to where I don't even think they need to add another relief pitcher with the arms that they have. And we might address that a little bit, but for the most part, this team, their focus remains or has shifted to the outfield or second base, whichever one you think is going to be much more of a need depending on how the roster actually shapes out. But we're just going to call it the outfield in general. That, I believe, is where the Dodgers' focus is right now. We can also address some of the rumors that have popped up. For example, the Tarik Skubal rumors. If you guys want to have that discussion, I'm more than happy to be able to have that discussion with you guys. But we're going to be focusing mostly on the outfield market because, for the most part, with the Dodgers, or with us as fans, we've thrown out a lot of names. And we often forget what types of players these actually are. And so what we're going to do is we're going to look at some of the numbers, how each of these players compare, and then we're also going to compare it to a particular player on the roster. Look, Casey and I had a show last week on Tuesday in which we broke the Edwin Diaz news, and we also had a really good back and forth discussion about the outfield and how to address the outfield and what it could possibly be to move off of Teoscar Hernandez. And what we're going to do is we're going to compare the outfielders that are available on the market with Teoscar Hernandez and be able to see just how well they are going to be able to compare. So then we as an organization, as the Dodgers as an organization, I should say, can make the best decision going forward of what's going to be the best way to address the team needs, both for 2026 and for the future. So I'm excited about this show. It should be a fun show for us to be able to dive in. V-Track, thank you for tuning in. Go Dodgers. Justin Llamas, thank you for tuning in. Good morning. 1 a.m. there in France, 42 degrees Fahrenheit, 6 degrees Celsius here. And then mentions Justin Brule just got DFA'd by Toronto to make room for Tyler Rogers signing. There's a lot of flurry going around with free agent acquisitions, especially in the relief pitcher market. Tyler Rogers got a really good 3-year deal with the Toronto Blue Jays. Robert Suarez, another reliever that at one point was connected to the Dodgers, got a 3-year deal with the Atlanta Braves. I think you got to feel happy if you're the Dodgers getting a 3-year deal for Edwin Diaz, given that there are several relief pitchers that, if you compare the numbers directly with Edwin Diaz numbers are better, and you're getting the exact same number of years for each player. Now, it comes with the highest average annual value for any relief pitcher to get Edwin Diaz for 3 years, but the Dodgers will absolutely take the highest average annual value for a relief pitcher if that means they don't have to give up the additional years to have Edwin Diaz, where there might be some struggles in years 4 and 5. Edwin Diaz at 3 years is absolutely the right call by the organization. CNAF, thank you very much for joining in. And then there's a comment, re-signed Conforto for dirt cheap. He had an off year with the smiley face. You know what? I did not have Conforto on my list of guys that we're going to compare to a Teoscar Hernandez. And I don't think we're going to compare Michael Conforto to Teoscar Hernandez. But that will be something that we'll we will take a look at some other alternatives to see if there could be a little bit of an upgrade for Michael Conforto. So thank you for tuning in to the show with what we have. So what we're going to do right now is we're just going to take a little bit of a look at the state of the free agent outfielders that are out there. And these are a majority of the outfielders that are out there. So if you guys remember earlier in the offseason, and something that I'm readily known for is for creating Excel sheets for you guys to be able to look at and just be able to organize the data in a more centralized way. I've actually been updating this Excel spreadsheet as we've been going along throughout the offseason in different areas that I'm sure we will address. The link to this Excel spreadsheet you can actually find in the description of the video. But what we're going to do is we're going to take a look at where the state of some of the free agent outfielders are. And this, the ordering, I wouldn't necessarily pay as much attention to. We'll address that in a little bit. But some of the guys that are off the board, Trent Grisham, obviously, accepted the qualifying offer. He is with New York. Today, Adolis Garcia, one of the options that was briefly discussed to be in addition to the Dodger, signed with the Philadelphia Phillies for a 1-year, $10 million deal. We saw Cedric Mullins get 1 year for Tampa Bay. Lane Thomas signed a free agent contract with Kansas City. And then Mike Yastrzemski, somebody that I had brought up as a good fit for the roster for the Dodgers because he is a good platoon bat in the outfield. He actually got 2 years plus a club option to go to Atlanta, so he is off the board, which means the cheap alternative option is off the board for the Dodgers. So that leaves on the free agent market guys like a Kyle Tucker, who is the best of the class, Cody Bellinger. There's a couple of other names, but nothing that really stands out too much as far as outfielders. Max Kepler, Rob Refsnyder would be a good right-handed platoon bat, but I don't know if they need that at this point. Randall Grichuk, Mike Tauchman, Harrison Bader would be the other guy that would stand out probably the most of this mix. I just threw Bo Bichette in here because this is actually technically I changed it from outfield to second base type options. So you have the state of the outfielders that are available right there. And then you also have a list of possible trade ideas. Now, not all of these guys are going to be traded, nor are all these guys available. I don't believe Corey Seager is available, but there was a brief moment in which he became available, so I threw him onto the list. But guys like Byron Buxton, Wilyer Abreu, Jaron Duran, Stephen Kwan, Lars Nootbaar, Brendan Donovan, all are names that have been brought up. Jake Myers recently has been somebody that has brought up. So we know a whole bunch of different names that have popped up. But what I wanted to do, especially with the names that the Dodgers have been more heavily linked to, is I want to compare these guys with a Teoscar Hernandez. Because I think it's important to compare these players to a Teoscar Hernandez because one of the discussions that Casey and I were having is, and he kind of threw me on the it threw me off the course because I was not expecting it with Teoscar Hernandez. He threw out the idea, because there's been a lot of rumblings with Teoscar Hernandez, why not trade Teoscar Hernandez and then trade for 2 outfielders? So what I wanted to do is I wanted to take an overall look of Teoscar Hernandez and then compare that to each one of the individual players. So what we're going to do first, we're going to first look at the overall player of Teoscar Hernandez. These are Teoscar Hernandez's numbers for the past little bit. This is courtesy of Fangraphs. You can go ahead and check these numbers out recently. The statistic that I like to use to be able to see how valuable a player is WRC+. If you look at Teoscar Hernandez as a player, and we're going to ignore 2020, just a very difficult season to be able to judge. Past 5 seasons by WRC+, 132, 130, 107, 132, and 102. A lot of people, and myself included, can look at those particular numbers and make a complete evaluation of who that player actually is. I believe the best way to be able to evaluate a player is actually with the best 3 or the last 3 WRC plus numbers, also taking into account some of the projection systems. So what you're going to notice on Fangraphs is you have these 2 numbers, 2026. You have 2 different projection models that are projecting how good Teoscar Hernandez is going to be in 2026, and they have him about a 112 WRC plus. Look at the past 3 years, 107, 132, 102. The big question with Teo is he closer to the 2024 Teoscar Hernandez, which we saw was phenomenal for the Dodgers, or is he closer to the 2025 Teo? And I think both of those, whichever one is closer to Teoscar Hernandez going forward, is going to tell a very different story as to how good of a player Teo is. And with the projection systems that they have him closer to about a 112 WRC plus, meaning they kind of have it somewhere close to the middle, meaning there's a little bit of a rebound that you could probably expect for Teo. But the question is how much? And this is really important because not just with the Dodgers in evaluating their players, but other organizations and how they see Teoscar Hernandez, with some of the rumblings out there that Teoscar Hernandez perhaps might be in some sort of trade conversations with other teams. Not saying that that is likely, but that is what the rumors are out there. What do you expect for Teo going forward as he's going to be entering into his age 33 season? I think realistically, the projections of about a 112 WRC plus, 12% better than league average, are probably fairly close to accurate, or at least the most median type value that you can get. And so the question is, especially when you're evaluating Teoscar Hernandez, is Teoscar as an offensive player much better, around the same, or worse than some of the other rumored options that are out there? And this is where we get into some of the fun stuff that we're going to have. So what I did is I picked a list, including Teoscar, of 12 different names. And I wanted to be able to compare, just because these are all guys that I think are relatively within the mix for the Dodgers to be rumored to acquire, or at least you could identify as them having some sort of fit. So we have on the list right here, we have Kyle Tucker, Byron Buxton, Wilyer Abreu, Jared Duran, Teoscar Hernandez, Brendan Donovan, Cody Bellinger, Bo Bichette, Lars Nootbaar, Stephen Kwan, Harrison Bader, and Jake Myers. What I want to do is I want to compare each one of those players and the numbers that they have, because I think it is relevant and important to understand the players that you are looking at and potentially wanting to acquire if you say the Dodgers should go out and trade pieces in order to acquire each one of these guys. So, obviously, know a lot of the names. What I want to do is I want to look at what the numbers actually state for each one of these guys. So what we're going to do is we're going to look at it by a bunch of different categories as we've done it before. So we have Kyle Tucker, and what we're going to use is we're going to use 2023 to 2025 statistics. A lot of information thrown at you guys. I apologize if this is a little bit mumbled. But we have WRC plus the past 3 years for each one of these players. Teoscar Hernandez the past 3 years has had a 114 WRC plus, 14% above league average. Remember, 2 of the past 3 years has been 107 and 102. Not necessarily great, but a little bit above league average. For the other players that the Dodgers are potentially connected with, this is how Teoscar Hernandez compares. The top of the list is, of course, a Kyle Tucker, who, if you were to compare offensively to the rest of the players, it's not even close. Kyle Tucker is the best offensive player out of this entire list. Past 3 years, a 146 WRC plus. You look at his weighted on base average versus his expected weighted on base average. They are really close to each other, meaning the results that are on the field the past 3 years for Kyle Tucker follow along with what the expected results were. Kyle Tucker is a phenomenal player. He is 30 points better than Teoscar Hernandez has been the past 3 years. He would be a significant upgrade from Teo. Rest of the list, we have Byron Buxton, 127 WRC plus the past 3 years. There's going to be some additional conversations that we might have about Byron Buxton and perhaps some concerns, but still about 13 points higher than what Teo has the past 3 seasons. Again, the expected numbers right along with what the actual results were. Wilyer Abreu perhaps is somebody that we have not mentioned quite as much because he is an exclusive platoon bat. You look at the past 3 years, his WRC plus versus right-handed pitching, 125, but versus lefties, you can't play him against lefties by the way that he's performing. A 62 WRC plus against left-handed pitching. Good platoon option though, 115 WRC plus, basically the exact same as Teo. Jared Duran, who we've talked about quite a bit, breakout 6.8 F4 season in 2024. 121 WRC plus the past 3 years, and again, similar to Wilyer Abreu, there's platoon concerns with a Jared Duran. Much better versus right-handed pitching the past 3 years, 138 versus a 78 WRC plus versus lefties. To add some context to that, that is about as good as Max Muncy is versus left-handed pitching. And Max Muncy hasn't been great against lefties the past couple of years. Brendan Donovan, 117 WRC plus against left-handed pitching. Again, right around what Teoscar Hernandez's offensive output has been the past 3 years. Again, another platoon option, much better against righties than he is against lefties. 131 versus righties, 81 against lefties. And with, I did not mention some of the underlying metrics with Jarren Duran, there is a dip in what his actual versus his expected results, meaning he actually overperformed what his expected results were. Brendan Donovan actually slightly underperformed what his expected results were. 337 WOBA, 347 WOBA the past 3 seasons. Again, 2023 to 2025 stats. Then there's Cody Bellinger, one of the other free agent options out there. 123 WRC plus the past 3 seasons for Bellinger. What's fascinating about Cody Bellinger is he has actually been much better against lefties than he has been against righties. 151 WRC plus against lefties, 113 against righties. Where there is some concern with Cody Bellinger, the underlying metrics do not suggest that what he has performed on the field is as sustainable or can be as successful as it has been. Past 3 years, 346 weighted on base average versus a 317 weighted on base average. He's dramatically overperformed what the expected results were. But again, 123 WRC plus, less than 10 points higher than what Teoscar Hernandez has produced. Bo Bichette, really good player. 116 WRC plus the past 3 years. Just 2 points higher than what Teoscar has over the past couple of seasons. He had a really poor 2024 season, I believe is what it was, where it was close to a 70 WRC plus. That could be skewing the results, but that is something to at least keep in mind, that he had a really poor season. Lars Nootbaar, Steven Kwan, both with a 108 WRC plus. Lars Nootbaar dramatically underperformed what his expected results were. So if you go with the underlying expected data, perhaps you like Lars Nootbaar, whereas Steven Kwan, right along with what his expected results were. I think with Steven Kwan, I think we picture somebody who is perhaps a much better hitter than what he actually is. He's just a slightly above league average bat by WRC plus, where Steven Kwan, you could argue, has a good fit, is defensively he performs really well, and he has perhaps some of the on-base skills, 344 on-base percentage, and just singles ability that could really help gel with this lineup well. And then we get Harrison Bader, Jake Meyers. Actually, there's a really good comparison between Harrison Bader and Jake Meyers that I did right here. Let's go ahead and zoom into this, because this is going to show you just how close of players both Harrison Bader and Jake Meyers. Harrison Bader, free agent. Jake Meyers, you have to trade from Houston for 2 years. Look at their batting average compared to each other on base percentage. WRC plus within 3 points of each other. Their expected weighted on base average over the past 3 years within 6 points of each other. Jake Meyers, it's better against lefties, but worse against righties. Harrison Bader's close in comparison with each other. ISO, both don't hit for a ton of power. Both don't walk an extraordinary amount and have a strikeout percentage relatively around 22%. I know they're trending in opposite directions, but if you average out the 3 seasons, they're not great. But they're both tremendous defenders by defensive run saves, outs above average, field and run value, and sprint speed. So with Harrison Bader, Jake Meyers, if you're looking for a center field option, they would be the guys that you could look to. But again, not great expected numbers, not great overall results, but where they provide a lot of value is with their defense. So the question becomes, when we're evaluating Teoscar Hernandez and his role and fit on this lineup, obviously we know Teoscar Hernandez struggles a lot defensively, but the question is, how well does he compare to the other hitters that the Dodgers could potentially go out and get and trade for? And as we see with the numbers that we have, the offensive numbers that Teoscar Hernandez has produced over the past several seasons is relatively comparable to the guys that are out there that are part of the outfield market. And I think you can have one of 2 takeaways from this. One, you could say that Teoscar Hernandez, with the overall numbers, the offensive production that he has, man, that's good enough. And the Dodgers have an in-house option to where they don't have to go out and make some sort of move with the offensive addition that he has been able to provide. Again, we'll get into this very specifics of what makes Teoscar Hernandez fit into this roster, or how well he fits onto this roster. But you say, man, offensively, there's not going to be that much of a difference. Why would we go out and trade prospects to make such a small marginal increase in the offense, if there is any sort of increase in offense whatsoever? Or you can take a look where the numbers offensively are relatively comparable and say that Teoscar Hernandez as a defensive player is not a good defender. Obviously true. Teoscar Hernandez the past couple of years, whether you put him in right field or you put him in left field, the numbers are not good for Teoscar Hernandez. He is not a good defender. And say we want to get in somebody who can produce offensively at a relatively close basis to what Teo has while providing good defense. That's going to be the better value type player. So the discussion that I want to talk about is not a discussion of should the Dodgers go out and trade for an outfielder. I think obviously the Dodgers should go out and add an offensive addition. That's something that I've been arguing throughout the entire course of this offseason. The question that we're going to be talking about today is the marginal difference between Teoscar Hernandez and an additional player that they could add to the mix worth going out and either trading prospects or trading away years of service or going out and buying for a free agent, either a Cody Bellinger or a Kyle Tucker or potentially a Harrison Bader to the mix, or a Bo Bichette, I guess, as added to the mix. Is the difference between them and Teoscar Hernandez and the sacrifices that you would have to make down the road worth it? And where I think this comes into culmination is you don't just have to look at the numbers of what they produced in the past. You also have to predict what each one of these players is going to do and going to be in the future to get an overall aspect of where each one of these players are. So what we're going to do is we're actually going to turn it back to here, but we're going to take the actual WRC plus numbers, and there's going to be some rankings that are put in here. Ignore those from now. I'll get into the algorithm of what I use to be able to rank each one of those players in just a little bit. But what we're going to do is we're going to compare the projected numbers and the actual numbers of what they produced the past couple of seasons, along with their age, to see if we think this makes relative sense for each one of these players. So we'll start at the top with Kyle Tucker, best offensive player, 146 WRC+. Obviously, he's going to be the most expensive option out there, but however, if you look at him in comparison to all of the other options as an offensive player, he is by far and away the best offensive player out there. Currently on Fangraphs, they have him projected for a 136 WRC+. That is similar to the offensive production that we get from guys like a Freddie Freeman consistently each and every single year. That's better than what we get from Will Smith or Max Muncy. That is one of the better offensive players in the game. They also have him projected for about 4.4 F4 this upcoming season. 136 would actually be a slight decline from what his numbers have been. So it's totally possible, especially with the underlying metrics that Kyle Tucker has been able to produce, the consistent power that he's been able to hit for. Hard hit percentage, barrel percentage aren't necessarily spectacular, but if you look at his walk and strikeout percentage, that is exactly the type of player that you would want on the Los Angeles Dodgers. Being a 4.4 WAR player, 136 WRC+ would be phenomenal addition to this offense, and by far and away the best offensive player that they could acquire if they didn't care about the years or the dollars to go out and acquire him. Kyle Tucker is the best projected hitter. And then we get into a little bit of a different conversation with Byron Buxton. Now, Byron Buxton has been a player that I have talked about a little bit before in the past, but I dove into some of his numbers a little bit. First off, Kyle Tucker entering his age 29 season. Byron Buxton is entering his age 32 season. Now, with Byron Buxton, what I was curious about is what his projections were going to be, because again, the past 3 seasons, he's put to combined 127 WRC+. I believe the past couple of seasons, he's put like a 130 WRC+ type of season in like 4 of the last 5 years, or something very similar to that, 3 of the last 5 years. Byron Buxton has been absolutely phenomenal, and he broke out again the last year. The very real question with Byron Buxton, and this is where there's a very real conversation about him, the upside is absolutely there. Best sprint speed in the game of baseball. Has been a really good defender in the outfield. We'll get into that aspect in just a second. The question is Byron Buxton going to stay healthy for the 2026 season? And do the Dodgers need a player like a Byron Buxton to stay healthy for the season, or do they just need him to be available for October? Is this situation similar to the pitching for the Dodgers? And are you going to continue to get the upside with the bat with Byron Buxton? Because the underlying metrics suggest probably yes, you're going to get some of that. His power numbers have been absolutely phenomenal. Where there is a little bit of concern with Buxton, there is a lot of swing and miss to his game. If you were to add in Byron Buxton to the outfield of Teoscar Hernandez, who has a very high strikeout percentage, and Andy Pages, who has a lot of swing and miss in the game, your entire outfield, all right-handed, with a lot of swing and miss in the game. And if you look at the defensive numbers, they're really solid for Byron Buxton, played the most, but if you look at the past 2 seasons, with his outs above average and defensive runs saved, they've taken a little bit of a dip defensively. So I don't know if he's is going to be as dynamic of a center fielder going forward. And if you look at the projections going into the next year, he's projected for a 119 WRC plus, slight decrease from his average over the past couple of seasons, and 3.3 Fangraphs WAR. Now, the 3.3 Fangraphs WAR comes from him playing 130 games in a season. Do you want to know how many times Byron Buxton, I should say, has played 130 games in a season? One time, back in 2017. So if you were to go out and get a Byron Buxton, if he even is available, which again, there's a lot of rumblings, especially with the Twins going out and trading, or signing, I should say, signing Josh Bell to the roster, that Byron Buxton, because of his no trade clause, isn't going anywhere. So perhaps this discussion isn't worth it. He's a very worthy contract to be able to get for this type of upside with just $15 million per year over the next 3 years. The question is, if you are trading the assets to go out and get him, are you okay with him potentially missing time with injury, because past history says that he is going to be injured, and with some of the potential decline with him getting into his 30s, with some decline metrics that we're seeing defensively, and with some of the projections having him come down with his offensive numbers. 119 WRC plus, again, that projected number is just 5 points less than what the number for Teoscar Hernandez has been the past couple of years. I just want to provide this into perspective in comparison to Teoscar Hernandez, because the conversation comes from Casey and I's discussion of whether the Dodgers should go out and trade for 2 outfielders. Byron Buxton, better defensive player than Teoscar Hernandez, just a little bit better of an offensive player is what he would be, or in what he is projected to be in, because Teoscar Hernandez is projected to be a 112 WRC plus player and a 1.7 WAR type of player. Just rolling through some of these a little bit quicker. Willie Abreu projected for 114 WRC plus and 2.2 Fangraphs WAR. That is right around in line with what Teoscar Hernandez has been able to produce offensively. This one was the most fascinating, curious to me. Jarren Duran, who broke out and had a really good 2024 season, took a little bit of a step back in 2025. Some of the early projections have him about a 107 WRC plus, 2.6 FWAR. I would project that to be maybe a little low, although if you look at some of the underlying metrics, perhaps that is a little bit more in line, especially if he plays a lot versus left-handed hitters. Brendan Donovan, 118 WRC plus and 3 WAR projected. Cody Bellinger, 116 and 3 WAR. Bo Bichette, 121 and about 4 FWAR. Lars Nootbaar, 115. Stephen Kwan, 113. Harrison Bader, 93. And Jake Myers, 98. So the reason why I wanted to bring up all of those numbers, and why I've been discussing a lot about the projections of numbers, is because as an offensive mindset, a lot of the players that are available are relatively close, both in past statistics and projected numbers going forward, to what Teoscar Hernandez has already been able to provide the Los Angeles Dodgers. Now, a lot of these names that are out there are also left-handed hitters. Kyle Tucker, Willie Abreu, Jarren Duran, Brendan Donovan, Cody Bellinger, Lars Nootbaar, Stephen Kwan, all left-handed hitters. And I think there's a reason why the Dodgers have been particularly making a lot of noise and targeting left-handed hitters, because the Dodgers have some sort of need, some sort of hole to be able to go out and fill in somebody that can hit against right-handed hitters. Or right-handed pitching. That has been a need that we have identified since the beginning of the offseason. So going out and acquiring a left-handed bat absolutely makes a lot of sense. But with Teoscar Hernandez, what he is able to provide for this team is not just a offensive bat that can hit for power on the right-handed side. Because if you were to trade a Teoscar Hernandez, you would have to help supplement that with right-handed or power that can hit against left-handed pitching. Because Teoscar Hernandez has shown up obviously clutch in those big moments. But I think he also, with the power that he's able to provide, provides an important piece to this offense, especially because we don't know how Mookie Betts is going to continue to age into next season and if the power is going to be there for Mookie. You think about the right-handed power bats in this lineup outside of Teoscar Hernandez, you're talking about Mookie Betts. Question mark of how much he's going to be able to produce power-wise going forward, given his step back that he had this season. Still expected to be a good offensive player, but home run power, a little bit of a question mark. Will Smith as a right-handed bat, who absolutely can hit a lot of home runs. It's about him going out there and staying healthy. And then if they were to move off of Teoscar Hernandez and add 2 left-handed bats, you would be putting a lot of pressure on Andy Pages to take a lot of big steps going forward for this team and for the organization. So as an offensive mindset, I don't necessarily know if there's going to be a massive increase or massive upgrade that you can have from Teoscar Hernandez. Again, this conversation comes specifically from Teoscar Hernandez in particular. I don't know if there's a great offensive addition or necessarily a great offensive fit to this team unless they were to acquire Byron Buxton and trade for somebody else. So I think the only scenario in which they could trade for 2 different players and get better from an offensive standpoint while also supplementing the power component would be if they were to trade for Byron Buxton and potentially somebody like a Brendan Donovan, who I've been pretty high on, or somebody like a Jarren Duran, who would help upgrade the spot that Michael Conforto, which, sorry to the person who wanted to compare Michael Conforto onto this list, we are not comparing Michael Conforto to this list. I just wanted to provide you with that because I think it comes down to a really unique and interesting question that Casey and I were getting into on the show on Tuesday last week. And this comes down to a question of what should be the Dodgers' goal going forward. And I want to pose this question to you guys. Should the Dodgers be solely focused on the 2026 season? I'm going to repeat that again. Should the Dodgers be solely focused on the 2026 season? Because if the Dodgers are solely focused on the 2026 season, and if that is what you believe the Dodgers should do, that is going to change your strategy, and then you're talking about any sort of marginal increase that you can to be able to improve the 2026 roster, you're going to look to be able to do. Now, I have a little bit of a difference in opinion because I see a path and an avenue where the Dodgers can focus on 2026 as being their main focus. And I think it's a different question of what should your main focus be on 2026 versus should your sole and only focus be on 2026. I think there's a difference between the two. Because if you're talking about sole focus in 2026 and improving that team, perhaps you look into Teoscar Hernandez and look at the other outfielders because comparable offensively, but better defensively, that's going to make the team probably better in 2026, at least on an on-paper type basis. Not taking into account the leadership that Teoscar Hernandez is able to provide, not taking into account the mentorship that he's been able to provide for an Andy Pages. But I think this is a fascinating question because when it talks about trade pieces that you have within your organization and how you leverage and utilize them, you should not be solely focused on 2026. You should be both focused on 2026 and future-minded as well. Now, that does not mean you don't do everything that you can to win a World Series in 2026. It means do what you can and make smart decisions going forward that are going to help improve your club in 2026, but also preserve the long-term health of your organization. So this comes down to a conversation of why not trade the outfield prospects that the Dodgers have. The Dodgers have a lot of different outfield prospects. They also have a lot of different pitching prospects that are coming through the ranks that are going to be added to the 40-man roster at some point. I believe the Dodgers as an organization in order to go ahead and succeed. And this gets into the conversation that has been widely talked about the Dodgers and their age of a roster. Why is their aging roster such a problem? Is because at some point, the players that you have on the roster aren't going to be there or aren't going to be productive anymore. And you need a supplement of younger talent to be able to come to the mix. I believe it is a necessity to the Los Angeles Dodgers to have youth be able to come up to the mix, which means that I see the young players that are part of this mix not just as trade pieces, but I see them as the key to be able to have sustained success for the Los Angeles Dodgers. And I believe there is enough talent on this team to both compete now in the future to where you can have the Ohtani era, which, yes, Casey is absolutely right when he discusses a lot about the Shohei Ohtani, maximizing Shohei Ohtani. Shohei Ohtani deferred all of his money. You have to do everything you can to make your team as good as it possibly can be. And you have a duty to go out and just make the team a whole lot better. I believe you have a obligation to Ohtani by what he did with that contract to compete and go all in for 2026. I also believe you have an obligation not to be terrible on the back end of Shohei Ohtani's contract, which means that you can do both at the exact same time. Both go ahead and try to compete in 2026 while having sustainable long-term success. Because with the outfielders that are part of the mix, you have a lot of different outfielders that are part of the mix, and certainly to go out and acquire one of these players, which they absolutely should go out and acquire an outfielder, all relatively around the mix, which is why I don't have a massive preference in the player that I think the Dodgers should go out and target. The only one that's standing out is a Kyle Tucker, which I just don't know if I would want to give him a significantly long-term deal. There's question marks with the health with that. But with the organization, with the outfielders that are part of the minor league system, a lot of the players are either going to be eligible for the Rule 5 draft after the 2026 or after the 2027 season, which means that the Dodgers have time to be able to utilize those pieces. And then it becomes a real question, and Jay actually brought up some good points, which I'm actually going to pull up in just a second, because then it becomes a question of how do you want to utilize the trade pieces that you have. And I think he really identified some really key trade pieces. This is from the comment section of the live stream that Casey and I did last week. There are 4 different categories in which the Dodgers could potentially trade from. Minor league talent, not on the 40-man roster. MLB level talent being used as depth for the 40-man roster. 26 players who are blocked or established but surplus major league players. So then it becomes a question of, for the Dodgers roster, how much or in which areas are you willing to divest or over divest to be able to potentially upgrade from a player like a Teoscar Hernandez if you wanted to do so? And so we go into the aspect of minor league talent that is not on the 40-man roster. I am not under the belief that the Dodgers have an obligation right now to trade those players, especially players that aren't eligible for the Rule 5 draft yet, unless there is issue being able to play each one of these players at their particular level. Meaning, I don't think it is an issue that the Los Angeles Dodgers have a Josue DePaula, a Zaire Hope, a Kendall George, Zach Earhart, James Tibbs. They have Eduardo Quintero, a Mike Sirota, Cole Myers, go on and so forth. All these different great outfielders. I actually don't see that as much of an issue, because I think there's going to be a need for some of those outfielders to be able to succeed at the major league level going forward for the Dodgers. The only issue I could potentially see with having all of those players who are not taking up spots on the 40-man roster that are in minor league system developing because they still need development is there going to be enough playing time for each one of those players, especially at Tulsa going into next season? If not, absolutely you can trade from that crop to be able to create room for regular playing time for each one of those guys. But otherwise, if you have minor league talent that's part of the roster on the that's not on the 40-man roster, I'm not eagerly looking to trade each one of those assets. Obviously, other organizations are going to be utilizing those. You utilize it for needs, You don't trade those pieces for things that you potentially would want, at least not yet, or some of the pieces that are incredibly valuable for your team. Looking at some of the other things, MLB talent that is used as depth for the 40-man roster. We'll get into that in just a second and get into an interesting conversation about where the Dodgers roster is. 26-man players that are blocked or established but surplus major league talent. Let's actually get into where the roster is right now. Let's talk about the overall roster construction of where the Dodgers are at right now, because I think this is a little bit more of a fascinating conversation that we can go ahead and get into. If we can go ahead and get this to load, trying to get my screen to be able to load right now with some of the players. Yeah, there we go. Perfect. All right, so this is where the Dodgers roster is right now. Now, I made a little bit of a change. I'm assuming that Roki Sasaki is going to be in the starting rotation for the Dodgers going into next year. If you include that, there's only 2 openings part of the Dodgers starting rotation and bullpen. They have Glasnow, Ohtani, Sasaki, Sheehan, Snell, and Yamamoto in alphabetical order. That is your rotation. Bullpen has Bonda, Edwin Diaz, Brusdar Guerrero, Tanner Scott, Blake Treinen, and Alex Vesia. You have 2 spots in the bullpen that can open up for any one of these guys. The question that you should have as to your team: do the Dodgers currently have enough pitching depth going forward? And I think this remains a unique question for the Dodgers on their team, because the Dodgers have uniquely dealt with injuries as a pitching staff over the past several years, or at least from a perspective of somebody who watches a lot of Dodgers baseball. They have uniquely dealt with a lot of injuries on their starting rotation staff. Tyler Glasnow obviously misses a lot of time for injury. Shohei Ohtani just went through surgery. Emmett Sheehan coming back from surgery. Blake Snell missed some time, and a lot of different guys have missed a lot of different time. And so the question is for the Dodgers. First off, let's go with the starting rotation. Do the Dodgers have enough depth in the starting rotation for this upcoming season? Currently, guys that are optionable and likely to be in the minor leagues to start the season are Landon Knack, who has 1 option year left, River Ryan, who has 3 option years, Gavin Stone, and Justin Robleski. The question is, if you were to trade from one of these guys, do you have enough confidence that they're going to be able to cover the innings that the 6-man rotation is going to need, and with the time that they're going to need to take off to be fresh going into October? Because I think it was actually a little bit of a unique blessing for the Dodgers in a weird way that a lot of the Dodgers rotation missed time throughout the course of the season. Blake Snell, Tyler Glasnow missed a lot of time throughout the course of the season. Emmett Sheehan obviously was slow to start. Shohei Ohtani slow to start the beginning of the season, but that meant they were fresh going into October. Can you expect a full season from each one of these guys, or is it going to be a need, especially because there's only a limited amount of options you can option these guys up and down from the minor leagues? It's not just we need to give Tyler Glasnow an extra rest. Let's go ahead and call up a River Ryan for maybe 2 starts, send him back down. Keep doing that over and over and over again. There's going to be a limited amount of times that you can do that for each one of the guys. So with the optionable starters that you have, is this going to be enough depth? And can you trade from this depth? Some of the guys that are going to be coming up that are going to be Rule 5 eligible after the 2026 season that I think are likely to be added to the Dodgers roster are guys like a Jackson Ferris, a Patrick Copen, and an Adam Sermanowski. I don't believe that any of those guys are completely ready yet to be in the major leagues for 2026. Jackson Ferris had a really slow start to the season, finished the season really well, but this is back-to-back seasons where he started off slow, and I think he's probably the closest and spent all of the season in Double-A Tulsa. He would be the next in line to potentially be behind each one of these guys. The question is, do you have enough depth, and can you trade from this depth and feel comfortable of where the rotation is at this point? Talking about optionable relievers, we have Ben Kasparius, Jack Dreyer, Paul Gervais, Eduardo Enriquez, Kyle Hurt, Will Klein, Ronan Kopp, and Bobby Miller. Certainly a couple of these guys you could potentially see moving off of if you have some other guys that are potentially down in the minor leagues that could fill into the mix, or some of the guys that are designated for assignments type of guys, but you have 2 guys that are part of the mix. So the question is for you as an organization is, how comfortable are you trading away from this pitching depth that is close to MLB ready. Again, not in the context of upgrading an outfield option, not in the context of upgrading one outfield option, I should say. Absolutely, the Dodgers should do what it takes to acquire an outfielder that's an upgrade from Michael Conforto that's going to make this roster and offense a lot better. The question that we are discussing in this point is how much of this depth can you go ahead and trade from for potentially two outfield options if you were to trade Teoscar Hernandez as well, and is the value of Teoscar Hernandez as an offensive player going to bring back as enough, or are you going to have to trade from this depth? And at least for me, especially because River Ryan coming back from injury, Gavin Stone coming back from shoulder surgery, we don't know necessarily how both of those guys are going to look. Landon Knack struggled a little bit down at the minor leagues. Justin Robleski succeeded, but he succeeded more out of the bullpen. I think you need some of these guys to be depth pieces for this organization, as much as that probably sucks as an individual player, but the reality as an organization is you need depth, especially starting depth in your organization, especially with as injury prone as the Dodgers are. How much are they willing to go ahead and invest in that talent? Some of the guys that could potentially be tradable assets, or at least you could potentially move off of at some point. Potentially a Bobby Miller. He's got 2 or 1 minor league options left. Will Klein only has 1 minor league option left, so you're looking at some of those guys potentially. Landon Knack's running out of minor league options, but those are some of the guys that don't have quite as much value in comparison to some of the other guys, but they additional pieces that are part of the mix. Going into the position players, currently 10 of the 13 position players are filled up with Ohtani, Smith, Betts, Edman, Freeman, Muncy, Rojas, Teo, Andy, and Dalton rushing. I believe the Dodgers should add, well, you can go ahead and, if you want to, throw Alex Call in the mix, and then there's 11. If they add an additional one, there's room for potentially one of these guys, which we'll get into this player in just a second because he was added to the Dodgers 40-man roster. The question is, do the Dodgers have the flexibility right now to be able to trade somebody like an Alex Freeland? Now, Alex Freeland is somebody that I don't necessarily know where I stand about the Dodgers going out and trading him. I believe this was a mistake by the organization with what the decisions that they made, and I made the statement in the past. I believe they optioned him down before, to the point where he utilized one of his option years last year. But with Freeland, you're looking at somebody that has the upside potential of being a replacement either at short for Mookie Betts or at third base for Max Muncy. Is that somebody that you feel comfortable moving off of at this point? And do you have somebody that could potentially be somebody to help fill in for a Mookie Betts or a Max Muncy going forward? That has to be the question with Alex Freeland. Not just is he blocked completely, but do you have somebody to be able to supplement and replace him at this point? Or could you acquire somebody that could help supplement and replace him that is as valuable as Alex Freeland is or could fit into the roster as well as Alex Freeland has? Both him and Hae-Sung Kim and Ryan Ward are going to be fighting for a roster spot likely in spring training. Ryan Ward's spot and his place on this roster and whether he should be traded is entirely dependent on who the Dodgers get in their outfield addition. If they go out and get an outfielder exclusive, you have Teoscar Hernandez, you have Andy Pages, and you have the outfield addition. There is no room for Ryan Ward on this roster, in which they should absolutely trade Ryan Ward because there would be no path for him going forward at the major league level. He would be the one that would probably be the most tradable for the Dodgers as a position player. But again, this becomes a question of what do you want going forward, and how is the team going to be, how are you going to fill in all the different holes as an organization if you go out and trade each one of these pieces? Which the entire conversation that I'm trying to have with you guys is, I view the Dodgers and their youth, their young players, as being a necessity and key into making this roster work and succeed going forward in the future. And so what I don't necessarily want to do is I don't want to throw away the valuable assets and perhaps the key to the future of this organization, because the players like Ohtani, Betts, Freeman, Muncy, all these players are going to start aging out. I don't want the future of this organization to be completely risked for an upgrade potentially over Teoscar Hernandez, which could be marginal at best. And the only margin that you could see where there would be a difference, and yes, absolutely, it makes a difference, is the defense in the outfield. But even in the defense in the outfield, Teoscar Hernandez is going to get replaced late in the game. So how much of an increase is that going to be for you as a team? What I think we have to do as fans, and what the Dodgers have to do as an organization, it is about marginal cost assessment and what the Dodgers want to do with their resources, because the Dodgers could, and this goes back to the question that I addressed, should the Dodgers be solely focused on the 2026 season, the Dodgers could go out and make a lot of trades to make their active roster as good as it possibly could be for the 2026 season and really try to go out there and get a three-peat. They could make a lot of different moves. The question is that going to be the best? And is the trade that you're going to make, and how much of a margin do you need to see increased in order to be able to make that trade? Because the reality is throughout the course of the season, there's going to be a lot of different things that happen. There could be injuries. What happens if Max Muncy goes down? You're going to have to dig into some of the prospect capital or play somebody that you might not feel super comfortable playing, but you're going to have to dive in and make some sort of sacrifice in the future. Pitching depth. There likely is going to be some sort of pitching injuries that happen to the Dodgers, and perhaps the Dodgers need to make some additional trades in the 2026 season. You might have to use some of your resources that you have. I am, perhaps you could say, a little bit more conservative on how I utilize resources, at least initially, when I see them as being the key for the Dodgers going forward in the 2026 season. So the question for you guys that I want to address is, based on what you see with the outfield market, and this is not just a which one of these guys is the best player, it's a question of which one of these guys is the best fit for the roster. And are some of these guys that are listed significantly better than what you have potentially with a Teoscar Hernandez in the mix? And what's going to make this Dodgers team as good as it possibly can be? Because that's obviously what we all want. We want the Dodgers team to be as good as it possibly can be for as long as they possibly can be and win as many World Series championships as possible. So again, some of the guys that are in the mix: Kyle Tucker, best option that could potentially be out there, highest dollar amount that it would take to go out and acquire him. Byron Buxton, perhaps the most upside that you could get on the trade market. Questions about injury, questions about how he will age. Wilyer Abreu, good left-handed hitter, good against right-handed pitching. Defensively is really, really solid. 33 defensive run saves over the past 3 seasons. You average it out, he's one of the best right fielders in the game of baseball. Could be something that the Dodgers go out and acquire. Jarren Duran, upside of potentially a 7-WAR season as we saw the past couple of years. Teoscar Hernandez, we all know about what he is able to provide. Brendan Donovan is going to be the guy that's going to provide some versatility, and the expected numbers are really solid for Brendan Donovan. Good bat-to-ball skills, does not strike out. Cody Bellinger, the question with him is obviously a reunion. Very good season with New York. Can he continue to buck the underlying metrics, some of the concerns with the power, and succeed? But still, solid defender with Cody Bellinger. Has not been a guy that struck out a whole lot recently. Bo Bichette, good option if you potentially want to move him to second base. Will he be in a price range where the Dodgers could go out and get a really good hitter? And Bo Bichette is a really good hitter. Lars Nootbaar, Stephen Kwan, additional outfield options. Lars Nootbaar, more of the walks, doesn't chase type of guy, versus Stephen Kwan is the doesn't strike out type of guy. Stephen Kwan, really good defender as well, but not quite as much pop. And then Harrison Bader and Jake Myers are the 2 center field options. If I were to guess for the Los Angeles Dodgers, I think all of those guys are options for the Dodgers to turn to. It would be my guess and expectation that one of those guys would be playing in the Los Angeles Dodgers in 2026, in addition to Teoscar Hernandez. Got to throw in that qualifier because it's more than Teoscar Hernandez is part of that mix. My guess is it probably comes from that crop of outfielders that the Dodgers could go out and go out and target and make this team as good as it possibly can be. And again, if they add another one of those players to the mix, you could do really well for yourself going forward into the 2026 season. By just adding one of those players, you can still be World Series favorite. So I want to get into some of the comments that you guys have. Spend a lot of time talking about this. Hopefully you guys were able to learn at least a little bit of something with some of the conversations that I have, and it's totally fine if you guys disagree with some of my opinions or points with this. My job is just to provide you guys with as much information as you possibly can, and then be able to go into the arguments from here. So what we're going to do, we're going to dive into some of the comments. If you have questions, please leave them down in the comments. We'll go ahead and dive into them in just a second. Vtrex says, just move Teo to left, Pies to right, and Edmund to center, then trust Kim at second base or sign a Bo Bichette. One of the things with a Ha-Seong Kim, let's actually dive into some of his numbers, and then we'll get into, before we get into the comments, before I forget, Dodgers made an addition to the 40-man roster. We'll get into that player just a second. I just want to let you guys, remind you guys, Ha-Seong Kim and some of the numbers, and perhaps why the organization might not immediately grant him the second base position. These are the numbers for Ha-Seong this past season. 170 plate appearances. Keep that in mind. Really good batting average, 280, 95 WRC plus. The batting average on balls in play is really high, close to 400, which means there's some expected regression. You look at his weighted on base average at 306 and his expected weight on base average of 0.259. There's reason to suggest that even the 95 WRC plus for Ha-Seong Kim isn't going to be replicated going into this next season. You look at his power numbers, he wasn't able to produce a ton of power at the big league level, lots of ground balls, 4.1 walk percentage. This is the big key with Ha-Seong Kim, and this is the thing that he has to fix going forward, is he had a 30.6 strikeout percentage at the big league level. In order for Ha-Seong to have a lot of success, he's got to be able to have that bat-to-ball skills. That is where he is at his best. Makes a lot of really good contact. And I think even at the minor league level, there's still a lot of room for Kim to be able to grow. So it would not be a shock to me. In fact, if it were up to me, unless there's some pretty dramatic improvements that we're able to see going into the next season, I think there's actually a lot of room for Kim to grow at the minor league level and work on having really good bat-to-ball skills going forward. I know 95 WRC plus was able to have a good, successful season this past year. I just don't know if they're ready to put Kim in a full-time role. And then with Bichette, the big thing about Bichette, and the reason why there's been some hesitation on my end, is I believe you would have to pay Bichette like a shortstop, even though defensively as a shortstop, he's not a good defensive shortstop. In fact, he grades out really poorly defensively at shortstop. And we don't have a full season sample size to see if he's going to be a good second baseman as well. And if he's not a good defensive second baseman, man, he's got to hit. And I don't think he hits for quite as much power to invest long-term, high average annual value shortstop dollars into a second baseman, hoping that he's able to continue to hit to the degree that he has going into his age 30 season. That's why there's a little bit of hesitation on my end for Bo Bichette. Really solid player and going to be a good hitter this upcoming year. Just the years going forward, it depends on the number of years that you're going to go ahead and get Bichette. That's my feedback. Kim and Bichette. Dave says win for LA would be Conforto to sign with San Diego or San Francisco again. We'll see what happens with that. Vtrex says Tucker is vastly overrated. Rather get Bellinger than pay Tucker. I'm not a fan of Bellinger either. Prefer younger players. The question is, what do you mean by Tucker is vastly overrated? Are you saying investing long-term money into Kyle Tucker is an overrated aspect and you shouldn't go out and do that? Or are you saying you prefer the contract that you would get from a Cody Bellinger versus Kyle Tucker? Or are you saying one for one going into the 2026 season, I would rather have Cody Bellinger on my team than Kyle Tucker as an offensive player? If you're talking about the offensive numbers, it absolutely is clear that Kyle Tucker is the better offensive player than Cody Bellinger over the past several seasons. I mean, we showed the numbers earlier, 146 WRC plus 2023 to 2025 for Kyle Tucker versus 123 for Cody Bellinger. Looking at on-base percentage, 380 versus 338. Slugging, 511 versus 477. I think, at least in my opinion, I think Kyle Tucker is the better offensive player and probably is going to project to be the better offensive player going forward. I think there's a lot of discussion that you can have. Contract length, 10 years versus 4 years of Cody Bellinger would be a fascinating conversation, or 8 years of Kyle Tucker versus 3 years of Cody Bellinger. Which one would you take? That would be a little bit more of a fascinating conversation, but just one-on-one comparing the two, I think I would much rather prefer and think Kyle Tucker is a better player. Looking at some of these, Dave says, I'd be good with Bader to play center field. We have some solid young outfielders on the farm that are a few years away. Yeah, and that's the thing with a lot of these players is they're 2 years away, and that fits, or at least a lot of the players they could potentially target are like 2 to 3 year type players. And I think that's exactly what the timeline, what the Dodgers are looking for, because I think they know they need to add some of these outfielders to the mix and make the team younger going forward. And I think adding some of those young outfielders into the mix and some stopgap actions along the way could really help this team. Question with Harrison Bader is, what are you going to get offensively? And I don't really expect a whole lot offensively. If you get Harrison Bader, I think you expect defense to get a lot better, but I don't think you're expecting much offensively for him. Maybe around league average would be probably a win for you if you're the Los Angeles Dodgers and you get Harrison Bader. Let's see, continuing to go through this. Think outside the box. What young outfielder is the best Dodgers could trade for? Want good fielder and contact with mid power? That's a good question. I have my list right here. I'm not for the long-term type of solutions. I'm looking for a little bit more realistic solutions, which I try to present you with some of the realistic solutions that I would somewhat like if I were the team. Let's see, continuing on going forward. CNF says Teo in left, Pages in center, and Call/Wardo in right field. Edmund can get some time in center field as well. I'm a no on Tucker. Continuing this, we get a comment, bring Jarren Duran back home to California. Dave says, I'd rather have Teo in left, Pages in right, and sign someone like Bader for 2 years until the prospects are ready in 2027. Very well could be what you could get. CNAF says Kwan is a gold glove outfielder and doesn't strike out. Bet him 9th in front of Ohtani. That's where the value of Steven Kwan could potentially be. The question with Steven Kwan is, what is the price going to be able to go out and get him? And are you willing to meet the price for somebody that has graded out just around a league average to slightly above league average type of bat? Because there really is not a whole lot of power to his game. That's a back and forth argument that you could potentially have on him. Let's see. Duran has 3 more years of control. Absolutely. Buxton always has to deal with injuries. Let's continue to go down some of these. Sammy, let's see. What's up, chat? Good afternoon to you, Sammy, as well. Talking a lot about Jackson Churio, which I don't believe that he is going to be an option to be traded. Again, just going through some of these comments, trying to catch up with some of these. If you have questions, please leave them down in the chat as well. I got to do all of this live for you guys. There's a trade for a Jackson Merrill, which will not happen between the two. He's locked up for long-term deals. Chuck Huddleston, thanks for joining us. Great job on the show yesterday as well. Let's see, Johnny Owen. Teoscar seals are diminishing. Absolutely right. Teoscar, his skill set is diminishing a little bit, which I think should cause you to have at least a little bit of pause when you're going out and signing some long-term deals to free agents. Or perhaps you should try to take the fullness of what is going on before going out and making some sort of demands to go out and acquire a player. And this is what I bring up with a Teoscar Hernandez, because I think this is a valuable lesson for Dodgers fans to learn, especially if you don't believe in Teoscar Hernandez going forward. Let's say that Teoscar Hernandez has a very similar season to what he had this past year. Round league average as an offensive player and really bad defense. That only netted him 0.6 Fangraphs WAR. That is not good enough for Teoscar Hernandez, who was paid a lot of money to be a good outfielder for the Dodgers and shore up an outfield spot. Remember this time last year, Teoscar Hernandez was not signed to the Dodgers, or around this time last year, he was not signed to the Dodgers. They were looking to fill in an outfield spot, or potentially 2 outfield spots, is what it ended up being, with them first signing a Michael Conforto and then eventually signing a Teoscar Hernandez. But coming off of the season that Teo had, he was coming off of, you look at the 2021 through 2024 statistics, 3 out of 4 seasons where he had around a 130 WRC plus, but there was some negative defense that were part of the mix. And the call for some people was to sign Teoscar Hernandez to any deal, no matter what it cost. Some calling for 4 to 5 type a year deal. The Dodgers were hesitant to do that, and they ultimately settled on 3 years. What I think the lesson that can be learned with Teoscar Hernandez is sometimes going out and acquiring the fan favorite, or somebody that you could potentially see as somebody who knowingly has holes a part of their game, or potentially could add holes a part of their game, and going out and paying whatever cost it can to go out and get that player can often be a foolish decision to be able to do. Not saying that signing Teoscar Hernandez was a foolish decision for the Dodgers, but if they were to sign him to a 4 or 5 year deal, that would have been a mistake for this organization. Yes, I know he's got a 4th year club option, but that's a club option. The organization doesn't have to worry about that quite as much. I think with the team, you have to be smart and wise, and you have to take the full aspect. So this comes for a player like a Byron Buxton going into his age 32 season with some declining numbers and with some reason to suggest that the offense potentially could take a little bit of downgrade just with some of the projection numbers that they have. Should the Dodgers go all in to acquire a Byron Buxton for that, there's some question marks. And also this comes back to different players like Excel Hernandez, with people being fan favorites. Do the Dodgers need to do all they can to go out and acquire fan favorites to go out and make the team as good as possible? That is the question mark that you have to ask as your organization, in a self-evaluation for players and how you evaluate them going forward. So, yeah, Teoscar Hernandez, really poor 2025 season. You're hoping for a bounce back in 2026. And if the numbers average out to what they had over the past several seasons, I think you're going to have a valuable bat in this lineup that's going to help the team succeed. Let's see. Chuck Huddleston, unless who we get is a lot better than Teo, we should just add an outfielder, just one outfielder. That's where I am right now. Just Lama says the priority is 2026. However, a window is at least 3 years. I think the window, and this depends on what they're able to do with some of the prospects. I think the window can be as long as the Dodgers want the window to be, or at least you have an avenue to where, this window has been open for the Dodgers for the past 13 years. 12 out of the last 13 years, they've won National League West titles. There's no saying that the window is just 3 years open, so you maximize these 3 years. The Dodgers have an opportunity to take what has been a 13-year window that's been open for the Dodgers, in which they've won 3 World Series championships, 12 National League West titles. They made it to the World Series 5 different times. And you can extend this window even larger while also having your team be as good as possible. And this is another question that I have, especially when it comes to if you wanted to go all in for 2026. If you have question marks about this offense going into this upcoming season, which, yes, they did struggle in the World Series, but they also had the second best offense by WRC Plus last year. If you question mark about the offense going into Shohei Ohtani's age 31 season, how many more questions are you going to have about this offense going into his age 33, 34, 35 seasons? How much more help is the offense going to need then versus now? And so the question is, do you want to utilize all of your trade pieces now to help an offense that already was one of the best offenses in the game of baseball and still can have a lot of success, to add multiple additions for marginal gains from what you would get on the outfield, for example, with somebody like a Teoscar Hernandez? Or do you want to strategically hold on to pieces that you absolutely can hold on to, make an upgrade? Again, priority should be in 2026, but also keep it in mind in the future as well. I think that's the tightrope balance that the Dodgers are trying to do. CNAB focus on the next 3 years. Cora is aging. Frady is signed through age 27. I think that is correct. The focus should be on this, but not the sole focus as an organization. And this is perhaps something that is difficult to be able to explain in a really good terms. The sole focus for an organization is not just on the upcoming season or the upcoming couple of seasons. The organization is thinking of years down the road as well, and how can the team be competitive. And if they trade from prospects, they're trading from potentially future resources or assets that they could use going forward. Chuck Huddleston, Austin, it's not that black and white. Too many variables about when changes should be made and the costs associated with them. Absolutely. A lot of different moving variables. To say long range focus, but short range opportunities take short range opportunities when presented with them. Yeah, and that comes down to a question of is the short range opportunity worth giving up some of the long-term investment that you could make? Showtime LA give Tucker 4 years for $200 million with an opt-out after every single year. Would be a fascinating concept, but I mean, if you're talking about getting the best outfield option out there to improve this offense, there's no doubt that Kyle Tucker is the best outfield option that is available for them going forward. Let's see, continuing to go forward with a couple of these, and the years-wise, I think that would be absolutely awesome to be able to do that. Chuck Huddleston, what is Ward's ceiling and where the floor, all things figured? That's a really good question, and one that's difficult to answer only because it's about opportunity. When you're talking about players and adding them to the mix, a lot of what is difficult to be able for these players to be able to do is to be able to adapt to the big leagues right away, which means that you have to build in some room for failure. And for a player like Ryan Ward, who has not gotten an opportunity, it won't get an opportunity until he's 28 or so, as there's just not an anticipated large amount of room for him to be able to fail a whole lot. But you're talking about a player, man, this past season at AAA level, 132 WRC plus, a big time power hitter, really cut down on the swing and miss that he has in his game. I was really happy with the improvements that Ryan Ward was able to have. For a player like him, I don't know what to long-term to be able to project, but you're talking about potentially somebody going forward. If you're talking about best case scenario for the Dodgers this upcoming season, is somebody that can hit for some power, that can be relatively around league average defensively, and can be a decent, solid platoon option in the outfield, somebody who can hit against right-handed pitching really well. If you look at the numbers last year, you hit right-handers really well, struggled against lefties, and then projecting years down the road is difficult because it's difficult to be able to make those year-long projections rather than going ahead and talking about what he's able to do this upcoming year. Let's see, continuing to go for some of this. Johnny Owen, the Dodgers know what they're doing. 12 consecutive, I should say, years of excellence proves it. The Dodgers will continue to be competitive even after the Ohtani era. That I absolutely believe is going to be the case for him going forward. Let's see, Bob Student 10, the Dodgers swept the Brewers gave one game to the Phillies, faced the historically best hitting team in the World Series and still won. Please take it easy on the needs and wants. Yeah, and that's the thing when you're talking about the organization and a team, is the Dodgers could go out and roll with this team tomorrow and still be as good as they possibly can, or still be among the favorites, and very likely and assuredly be the favorite to go out and win the World Series. So if you're talking about a need, do the Dodgers necessarily need any one of these guys? Not necessarily, but if you're making the team as good as possible or as close to a need, outfielder would probably be as close to a need as it could probably be going forward for the upcoming season. CNAV says the only need on the roster is a third catcher on the 40-man. Currently, we have two. I don't even know if they need a third one on the 40-man. You just need somebody that's at the AAA level that could come up and you could add to the 40-man roster when needed. Let's actually go ahead and talk about the one player that the Dodgers brought in before we go ahead, answer a few more questions, and then log off. Because the Dodgers made an addition to the 40-man roster that a little bit surprising. Somebody that I have a little bit of familiarity with, not a ton. It's been a while since I've heard about this player, Michael Ciani. Now, the reason why I've heard of Michael Ciani, he is a former Dayton Dragon. Back, I believe, in 2021, he played for the Dayton Dragons. So I had a chance to be able to see him. Offensively, as a player at the big league level, not a ton of experience, but the numbers aren't really super encouraging. 63 WRC plus, underlying metrics suggest that he is just not a good offensive player. Where he does exceed and excel, though, is his defensive measures. If you look at him, Michael Ciani, phenomenal defensive player. During the past 3 seasons, 7 defensive runs saved, 17 outs above average, 13 fielding run value. While that might be difficult to be able to understand the quantifying aspect of how good that is, if you were to take those numbers and say Michael Ciani is a full-time center fielder and average that out over 162 games, that would be like Michael Ciani being a 14 outs above average player. which is among the best defensive players in the game of baseball. On a per-game basis, Michael Ciani is one of the best defensive players that is out there. The question mark is, and the big thing about him, though, is the offensive contribution that he's able to provide just has not been there at the big league level. So they're added him to the mix. He's got one option year left. Very well could this be this upcoming year's Justin Dean, in which they're not planning on utilizing him as a player to hit well or hit a whole lot for the team, but can be somebody that can be part of the mix defensively for the team late in the season. And especially if they utilize a trade where they're going to trade some of the guys that are on the 40-man roster. If you have somebody like him added to the mix, even if he just spends a majority of his time in Oklahoma City, but late in the season comes up and perhaps plays in the postseason a good role defensively, it is very difficult to be able to find, especially optionable guys like a Michael Ciani, as good of a defender as he is. Again, the numbers on him, if he were to average 162 games, he would be like a 14 outs above average type of player. That's how good Michael Ciani is. And we'll see if he remains on the 40-man roster. It could be something where they claim him and then decide to designate him for assignment and try to sneak him by all the other organizations and keep him within Oklahoma City. That could very well be a possibility with the Dodgers trying to clear roster spots going forward. But he is part of the organization now. We'll see what the Dodgers' plan for him is going forward as part of this club. Let's get to a couple of other questions on here. Let's see. We get a question. Who do you think the Dodgers do you think the Dodgers would trade for a Tarik Skubal? It's a very good question mark. Obviously, there's been a lot of rumors about Tarik Skubal potentially being traded to the Los Angeles Dodgers. That was combined with an aspect of potentially an Emmett Sheehan and a Tyler Glasnow could be part of the trade package. When that was being discussed, that did not make a whole lot of sense to me, only because if you're talking about if a Tyler Glasnow and an Emmett Sheehan were part of that trade package, you're talking about the number 5 starter being a Roki Sasaki. Now, I'm a big fan of what Roki Sasaki did during the postseason. Obviously, was phenomenal, and the Dodgers would not have won the World Series if not for Roki Sasaki and what he was able to produce for the bullpen this past year. But I think we're forgetting just what Roki Sasaki was like in the starting rotation. And this is not to say that Roki Sasaki will be this exact same pitcher in the starting rotation, but he really struggled in the starting rotation. These were his numbers this past year as a starter. A 4.46 ERA, but a near 6 expected ERA, a near 6 FIP, and an expected FIP of 5.53. The reason why I had a concern about potentially trading both Glasnow and Sheehan is while you would be getting one of, if not the best pitcher in the game of baseball in a Tarik Skubal, you'd be trading some of your depth to the point where, man, if Shohei Ohtani, if a Yamamoto, if a Blake Snell, or if a Tarik Skubal gets injured, you're going to have to play a Roki Sasaki or a River Ryan or Gavin Stone coming up from injury. There's just a lot of questions about the depth being able to pull for the starting pitching side that has me have a lot of question marks of whether that would make sense. Now, came out in recent days, in case he addressed this during the show yesterday, that for Tyler Glasnow, he's been informed apparently by the organization that he will not be traded. So if we're talking about a Tarik Skubal trade, I think it starts one with an Emmett Sheehan. And then because it's not going to include a Tyler Glasnow, very likely is going to include a large collection of prospects, or potentially you're looking at maybe one an Emmett Sheehan and maybe one of a River Ryan or a Gavin Stone, or maybe a Justin Robleski part of the mix, and a bunch of different prospects to be added to go ahead and go to Detroit. Tarik Skubal is a phenomenal pitcher. We'll see if that plays out. Skubal, phenomenal again, and adding him, having a rotation of Glasnow, Ohtani, in no order, Glasnow, Ohtani, Snell, Yamamoto, Skubal, Sasaki would be absolutely unbelievable. We'll see if it actually happens. I don't think it's going to happen right now, but I also did not see them signing Edwin Diaz to 3 years, so you never know what you're going to get. But it's going to start probably with Emmett Sheehan, add in a few additional pieces. It's going to hurt to get 1 year of Tarik Skubal. The question is, does that dramatically improve your team going forward? Or just how much depth from the starting pitching wise do you want to go up and give for Tarik Skubal? And if it's not from the starting pitching side, which again, the Tigers made it to the playoffs each of the past 2 years. They're looking to be competitive in 2026 and beyond. They likely are looking for major league type of talent. So they probably would be looking for, perhaps, as I had mentioned, one of at least Emmett Sheehan and then one of the other starters to add to the mix. Or if not them, either a Dalton Rushing or maybe an Alex Freeland, plus several different high-ranking prospects added to the mix. The question is whether you think that's going to be worth making the cost-benefit analysis for that. Continue, go forward. Johnny Owen says Cody Bellinger splits away from Yankee Stadium were below league average. They absolutely were, and that's a concerning sign with Cody Bellinger. For me, more concern with Cody Bellinger just has to do with some of his underperformance with his power numbers and what the expected numbers suggest will happen for him going forward. But still a really good, solid defensive player to add to the mix. Let's get into maybe 2 more questions or so. DePaula hopes Sirota will be ready mid-2027 too. One of those guys will be great. We'll see what happens with another one. Another one maybe league average. Be patient with each one of those guys. Still a lot of work for each one of them to go through to be able to make them as good as possible. Lucy Chen, this is going to be the last comment that we're going to get to, is what do you think they need to do to utilize Rushing? I think he needs consistent playing time in order to hit. Yeah, that is a great question to be able to ask. And I think with Dalton Rushing, and I talked a little bit about the show when projecting out playing time for each one of these guys. I think there is potentially a way in which you can map out 350-ish plate appearances for Dalton Rushing, which that probably is a little bit low from what you were anticipating or wanting for Dalton Rushing. And I think the main part for Dalton Rushing is going to be, it has to be a good balance between Will Smith and Dalton Rushing this upcoming year. It has to be at least a 2-for-1 or Will Smith to Dalton Rushing type start. I would look for Rushing, if it was up to me, to look to start 60-ish games this upcoming year. That would give about Will Smith about 100 games behind the plate, and Will Smith about 60-ish. You can push that potentially up to 65, 95 if you wanted to give Will Smith a little bit of additional rest. Again, the question is what is going to make Will Smith best, and I think a little bit of additional rest for Will Smith is going to make Will Smith better, while also providing additional opportunities for Dalton Rushing. And I think the next avenue is actually not going to be the outfield for Dalton Rushing. I think that's going to add too much onto his plate for him to try to consume when he's already trying to adapt to big league pitching. And when we're talking about Dalton Rushing in the outfield, we're talking about a month or 2 in Oklahoma City that he had in the outfield as the only time he had in the outfield. I think that the avenue that's going to be there for Dalton Rushing is getting Freddie Freeman off his feet at first base. And that's where the conversation has to be. It has to be with Freddie Freeman finding ways to be able to get Dalton Rushing into the mix. If you have 60 to 65 games behind the plate for Rushing, and you add in another, let's say 15 or so games at first base, you're talking about close to 350 plate appearances for him, and somebody that can play every other day or so. You add all those up, 65 games behind the plate, maybe 15 games at first base, that you're talking about 80 games. Then you can also add in potentially some pinch hit opportunities if you want to pinch hit Dalton Rushing in certain situations if you wanted to give up the catching position, which I don't think is completely likely. But then you're starting to look at a relatively full-time role for him. And remember, with catchers, the difficult thing about catchers is you don't want them to play necessarily every single day, but you need them to get enough reps to get comfortable. And this was what I pointed out with Dalton Rushing. If you compare Dalton Rushing's numbers in his first year at the major league level, they're actually really comparable to Aaron Judge's first year at the big league level. And that is not to say that Dalton Rushing will be Aaron Judge, but that is to say that I don't want you to judge his talent quite yet on very limited major league experiences. If you find opportunities to get him into the mix, like as was outlined, I think you're going to make Will Smith better, by giving him additional rest. I think you're going to make Dalton Rushing better by giving him time to get more major league plate appearances at the big league level. And I actually think this is going to be a good thing potentially for Freddie Freeman to get him off of his feet as well. So I think there is an avenue. What this is going to require, though, is the veterans that are part of the Dodgers mix to actually be willing to give up some playing time for Dalton Rushing to be as good as he possibly can. And that's what I would say with Dalton Rushing and his mix. Jeff, thank you very much for joining on the show. I know that was going to be the last question. We'll read this. I would not be in favor of trading Sheehan or Riverain. Really no reason for Detroit to consider a trade until the deadline, unless someone makes an offer they can't refuse. That's the biggest thing with Tarik Skubal. You're going to have to make a very impressive offer to get Tarik Skubal, and I don't know if that is something that the Dodgers want to do right now. They are in an opportunity where they feel like they can be opportunistic, which is why I don't think the Dodgers have made a move for an outfielder yet, because I think they're waiting to see if they can be opportunistic. Is there a world, is there an environment where you can go out and sign a Kyle Tucker to a shorter, higher term annual value deal if the market completely collapses, or some of the other teams decide to go out and fill their outfield needs with other players? For example, with what the Phillies did with the Adolis Garcia, they signed him to a 1-year deal. Does that take them completely out of the situation with a Kyle Tucker? Are they waiting for more teams potentially do that, to where Kyle Tucker looks at his market and says the best deal is going to be for the Dodgers, perhaps on a shorter term deal with opt-out so we can re-enter into free agency? Are they looking to be opportunistic and try to wait out to where Cody Bellinger's 5-year deal becomes a 2-year or 3-year deal? Because I think 2 or 3 years for Bellinger looks a lot better than what a long-term deal. If it's more than 3 years, I'm out on Cody Bellinger. But if it's a shorter-term deal, I think you could argue that he makes about as much sense and is very comparable to somebody like a Steven Kwan, adding him to the mix. Are they going to be opportunistic about going out and trading for some of the other options, see if some of the price comes down for there? I think you're having a team that, yes, knows that they have to address the outfield, but they can wait a little bit because they can make any sort of deal that is possible, and they really have a lot of different cards that they can go ahead and play with. So it could take some time for this move to go ahead and play out. What I would advise is trust within the organization, because this is an organization that, as we had mentioned in the show, won 12 out of 13 National League West titles. They have had this window open for a long time, and I want this and this is something that I want. I don't want just to be competitive in 2026. I want to see this window open as long as it possibly can. And sometimes that means going out and making big deals. Sometimes that means going out and showing a little bit of restraint to make the team as good as it possibly can be. So the question that I ask for you guys, and this goes back to the original discussion with the outfielders that are out there, reviewing all of the information that we have, both with projections into 2026, what they have done the past couple of years, which one of those outfielders, knowing what it's going to cost to get each one of these guys, do you believe is going to be the best fit for this roster? Because I believe the Dodgers are and should acquire one outfielder or one second baseman, if you want to include Brendan Donovan as part of this mix. They should include one of those guys, go out and target one of those guys. The question is the marginal cost to increase this team better, or is it going to be worth it to go out and trade Teoscar Hernandez as well? I don't believe so. Perhaps you disagree. This is where we can have really good conversation. Marginal assessment for the Dodgers going forward this year and for future years. That's what the Dodgers are discussing. That's what we can discuss in the comment section as well. Thank you very much for tuning in, being a part of the show. Can't thank you guys enough. We will be back later this week. I'm sure Casey and I will find a time to be able to do some show. It is Christmas time, so I want to wish you guys Merry Christmas as well. I also want to do one more thing before we get out. Obviously, for you guys, there is what we have is we have the privilege to be able to discuss the Los Angeles Dodgers here, Dodgers Daily. Dodgers Dawgs, part of the Dodgers Daily Network, and there's a lot of people that have the privilege to be able to do that, and there's a lot of different great shows that are out there. And I'm sure that, and I've seen you, I have the chance to be able to watch a lot of those shows, get a lot of different information from each one of those. I highly encourage you guys to be able to check out all the different shows that are out there. And I know you guys do that, but one thing I want to do this week, and this is because obviously of stuff that has happened in the news. We won't get into that in particular, but if you could guys keep the guys over at the Incline Dodgers podcast in your guys' thoughts. They obviously are going through a lot right now. If you could just go out and show some support to them during this very obvious time of need, that would mean a lot, because we as a Dodgers community, being able to talk to you, try to keep this as a family. And when there's people out there that are hurting, obviously you want to go out and show some of your support. So that would be my encouragement during this time right now. Just go out and show some support to those guys over there, and just do what you can to be able to be as good of people as you possibly can be here, because we have the privilege of watching the back-to-back World Series champions and rooting for them. And I don't think we realize how much of a privilege that is. And with the community that we've been able to form here at Dodgers Daily, I want everybody to be able to experience that. And when times are good, to be able to celebrate with the Dodgers, but when times are bad, to be able to go out and rally and support some guys. So that would be my encouragement. Obviously, thoughts and prayers for Jake, for over there at the Incline Dodgers podcast. Absolutely praying for him, and whatever they need, more than happy to be able to support them with that. Thank you guys for tuning in. Dodgers Dogs, a part of the Dodgers Daily Network. We will be back sometime over the next couple of days. Tomorrow, KC is releasing another player interview. If you have not checked out the player interview with Peyton Martin, man, Peyton Martin is a fun player. And he is, especially when he pitches as good as he can, man, he is a really good pitcher. I had the privilege to be able to watch him in West Michigan this past year. I got to take a buddy of mine, and it was noticeable how good Peyton Martin was. I believe it was the end of May is when we watched that start, and he was really, really good against the Whitecaps. Go check out that interview with Peyton Martin. A really fun dude, too. You will enjoy that interview with him. More player interviews coming up throughout the course of the week. Until next time, though, thank you for tuning in. Thank you for tuning in. Can't wait to be able to interact with you guys next time. God bless, and go Dodgers.